Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I'd like everybody to close your eyes. Your job right now is to listen. I'm going to chant something for you, and I would like you to listen as deeply as you can. And if I mess up, you can practice metta for me. Karaniya matta kusalena yang tang satang padang abhisamecha saku uju cha suju cha Suvaccho cha samuddu anatimani santu sakko cha subharo cha appakeccho cha salahu kavuti santandriyo cha nippako cha appagabho kulesu ananugido nacha kuddang samachare kinchi yena vinyupare upavadeyum sukhinova kemino hantu Sabbe satta bhavanti sukhitatta ye keche bhana bhutatti tasava tavarava anavasesa tighava ye mahantava majhimma rasika anukkatula titava yeva adita ye chadore vasante avidore uttava sambhave siva Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta na paro parang nikkubetta nyatiman yatta katachinang kanchi vyarosana patighitsana nanyamanyassa dukkamichaya matta yatta niyang putang ayuso ekaputang anurakke evang pisabbe bhuttesu Manasang bhavayeya perimanam Mettang cha sabbalokasming Manasang bhavayeya perimanam Udhang arhocha tiriyancha Asambhadang avirang asampadang Titang charang nisinova Sayanova yavatassa vigitamidho Etang sating atiteya Brahmang etang Viharang idhamehu Diting ditava anupagama silava Dasanena sampano Vinaya Kamesu vinaya gedhang Nahi jatang Gambasayang punaretita. What you heard, usually chanted much better, is something that has been chanted in the Buddhist world every day for at least 2,000 years. That is the Buddha's instructions on metta. It's called the Karaniya Metta Sutta. And we're going to be going over that in English during this talk. But we're going to start with a few preliminaries first. The first thing I want to go over in this talk is we're going to go over the definition of metta and the mindset of metta. We're going to talk about ill will and anger. Then we're going to go into the Karaniya Metta Sutta and talk about the origin of the metta practice that we practiced just this last meditation period in another sutta. And then I'm going to end with metta to yourself, how we do that, why we do that, and various aspects of that. So, the word metta, most often translated, most often heard as loving kindness. This is a very, actually is one of the most original translations for metta, as far as I know. And the translations for Pali go back at least 100 years into English. And recently, there's been different monastics, different teachers, who translate metta differently. The first person I had contact with when I heard a different definition of metta was my preceptor, Bhante J, at Bhavana Society. When I went to a metta retreat there, and he spoke about how looking at the root of the word, the root of the word metta comes from the word mitta, which means friend or friendliness. So Bhante J translates metta not as loving kindness, but as loving friendliness. And the reason why he does this is because of that root, the root meaning friendly. We have another word for kindness and compassion. That's karuna. So this is why it's translated by Bhante J as loving friendliness. Now there is another way to translate this word as well. And if you know Thanissaro Bhikkhu, or Ajahn Jia, he translates metta as limitless goodwill. And the reason why he translates this metta as limitless goodwill is not necessarily exactly what the translation is. But if you look up friendliness or friendly in the dictionary, one of the synonyms for that is goodwill. So, one of the other roots where loving comes from, and the loving kindness, some people translate it from the root of mid. And this root in the Sanskrit can mean love, but it also can mean growing fat or growing large. So the way I like to look at this is when we practice limitless goodwill, our mind grows large with goodwill. We are growing large or fat with goodwill, however you like to say it. So, in translating metta, you'll most often hear me say limitless goodwill. I prefer that term specifically for my own practice because I feel loving has a lot of English connotations that don't necessarily match up with what I've read in the suttas or what the Buddha is talking about metta. But the way you look at it, you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to take that definition. But I wanted to give you a little overall of the different ways that metta is translated. And so, friends, metta is not magic. That's the first thing that I wanted to go over as we go over the mindset of metta. When we are sending out our metta to all beings, there's no expectations that there's positive vibes flying through the air and going into the minds of other beings and all these kind of things. I remember years ago hearing a study where people tested prayer and positive thought on people who were sick, and supposedly one of the findings of the study was that people who, even though they didn't know they were being thought about, they supposedly did better when people were sending them positive thoughts. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that isn't actually the purpose of metta. The purpose of metta is, as I said yesterday, to directly counteract ill will, anger, and hatred in our minds. And there's a wonderful poem. The poet, as far as I know, is not a Buddhist, and this is not a Buddhist poem, but I think it fits metta succinctly and perfectly. And it goes like this. They drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took them in. That's Edwin Markham. And what that is showing you is the purpose of metta. In this poem, he's not breaking through this person's circle. He's not fighting that person's circle. He's creating a circle around that person. He is encompassing that person, regardless of how they feel about him, regardless of what they do to him. He's encompassing that person, or whoever they are, with love. That is metta. And I always keep that poem in my mind because it's a wonderful, very quick, succinct way to go to the real, true meaning and purpose of practicing metta. And so the Buddha gives a couple similes about the importance of metta. And they're usually, one of the similes that Buddha likes to use is using a finger snap. So what the Buddha says is that somebody who practices, well, in this specific example, he says he's talking about monastics. But a monastic who practices metta for the time of a finger snap is worthy of the food and the medicine and the things that are given to him or her. The other one is, the Buddha says, if somebody came and brought and donated 100 baskets of food in the morning, 100 baskets of food in the afternoon, 100 baskets of food at night. Greater still would be somebody who practiced metta for the length of time it takes to pull a cow's udder. That is the importance of metta. The Buddha's not saying, well, don't do charity and don't practice and all that kind of stuff. That's not the point of this simile. But what he's saying is he's pointing to the importance of this practice, the benefit that this practice brings us. And I want to read this direct sutta quote so that you get the full breadth and the importance of his exhorting us. He says, therefore, you should train yourselves thus. Just as like I said before, this is a practice. This is a training. You do this over and over and over again as a habit. We will develop and cultivate the liberation of mind by limitless goodwill. Make it our vehicle. Make it our basis. Stabilize it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus you should train yourself. That's the Buddha's message to us right there. And what is he saying in this? He's telling us to make it part of our livelihood. It's not something that we just do from 4 to 5 every day when we sit down on the cushion. We cultivate it. We make it our vehicle. That is the importance. A few snippets about the importance of Buddha exhorting us to practice metta. And so, we'll move into anger and ill will, hatred. The very first, if you're familiar with the Dhammapada, which is a very famous book of Buddhist verses, the very, very first thing in the Dhammapada, and I'm not going to do the Pali for you, I'm just going to do the English, is all actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master. Mind is their maker. Actors speak with a defiled state of mind, an unskillful state of mind. Then suffering follows you, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. Think about that simile. I think most people here are not brand new meditators. Maybe you've been meditating for a while. Maybe you've been meditating long enough to really be able to look at various mind states. And you can see, when you have a mind state of anger, ill will, hatred, it's very heavy. It's very cumbersome. It feels like a prison. Like you're trapped in this mind state. And it's just like this poor ox that is yoked to this heavy burden, this heavy cart. And this ox has to pull this heavy cart with him wherever he goes. And probably this cart also has a driver, a guy on top of the cart, and he's whipping the poor ox too. Right? That is a mind suffering from ill will and anger. A heavy, heavy burden. So what about the second part of this? All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master, mind is their maker. Actors speak with a pure state of mind, a skillful state of mind, a mind of metta. Then happiness follows you, as your shadow follows you without departing. Think of this simile. A shadow is very light. It doesn't weigh on us. It doesn't bother us. It's just there. It can follow us, and we don't even pay attention to it, because we're not carrying a heavy burden anymore. And if you've ever been able to see what happens when your mind goes from that heavy, horrible, really prison-like mind state of being in a mind of ill will and hatred, and then it's gone. You take a breath, and it's like you've just been released from prison. Like you're in the clean air. That is the difference. That is the mind state. That is the heavy burden of anger, ill will, and hatred. And as I stated when I read the last suttas, the Buddha said, the liberation of mind by loving kindness. The Pali there is Metta Cetavamutti. And that is, or another way of liberation or release of mind through limitless goodwill. And what are you releasing when you practice metta? You're releasing your mind from hatred, ill will, and anger. A very worthy, very peaceful, a very good practice, and a very good thing to do. Because if we abide in a mind state of anger and ill will and hatred, eventually it consumes us. And so the Buddha gave us this tool, metta, to practice this mind state, this mindfulness, to help us in this regard. So there's a wonderful sutta, it's called Subduing Hatred. And throughout my 2 talks in this retreat, I'm going to talk about suttas, and I'm going to mention maybe Majjhima Nikaya and Ananguttara Nikaya and all of these things. Don't worry about that too much. I will, at the end of the retreat, I'm going to post up a paper that has all of the suttas that I've mentioned, everything that I used in my talks. So at the end of the retreat, you can just, snap a picture of it, and you can go home and without that information. So in this sutta, the Buddha talks about what you should do if you have a mind state, if anger, if aversion comes up towards a person, what do you do? The very, very first thing is practice metta towards that person. In these ancient Nikayas, the Buddha only a couple times talks about metta for individual people. this is one of those times. So if you have somebody, maybe they've harmed you, maybe you don't like them for one reason or another, maybe it's a coworker that annoys you for one reason or another, you practice metta for that person. The way I've done it, and it's been very beneficial to me as well, I do this practice. And the way I've done it usually is, I picture that person smiling in my mind, and I give metta to that specific person. And that usually helps. Of course, maybe, they go away and then 30 minutes later you see them again and your mind goes right back to the same thing. This circular narrative of why this person is not good enough, why you don't like this person, why you have an aversion toward this person. And when that attacks, you remedy that with this metta. And if metta doesn't work, the next thing to do is to practice compassion for that person. Developing empathy. What is compassion? The Pali word is karuna. When compassion is seeing that somebody is suffering, seeing that somebody is going through a tough time, and having empathy for that. Having understanding for that you too go through these tough times, and you too probably are, have the same situations that this person is going through. So we practice compassion for this person. If that doesn't work, then we practice equanimity. And what that is, try to practice our mind so that we might not be able to have kindness and thoughts of love and friendliness for this person, but at least let's try not to have hatred and ill will for this person. So if you think about it as a graph, on one end is hatred and one end is goodwill. Or we want to push it towards that goodwill. And so if that doesn't work, the next thing to do is to do your best to ignore or avoid the person. Sometimes when when you have these mindsets, when anger comes up, sometimes it's telling you do have to do something. You want to practice metta so that you can let go of that anger. But sometimes it's saying, maybe this isn't working for my own benefit and for the benefit of the other person. Maybe I should do my best to ignore the person, try to avoid them. Not to be mean to them, but to just lessen your contact with this person. And the fifth one is to recognize that they are the owner of their karma. They are the owner of their actions. Whether you believe in karma or not, it doesn't matter. Your actions lead to results in this life and the next. Results that you can see and results that you can't see. So you can see this, people who, I was Child Protective Services. That was my career before this, becoming a monk. And I saw how people, even when they tried to, they really had the desire to change their lives because of things that they did in the past, the actions that they did in the past. When they were trying to change their life, things would happen. Maybe they forgot that they had a warrant and they get arrested, and all the good work that they were just doing gets thrown away. So unfortunately, we are subject to our actions. We are the owner of those actions. And so there's a wonderful story. Again, this is a sutta story. It's the sutta. This is an ancient story. It's been retold in many different ways. It's based off a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. The sutta is called Ugly. If you've heard Ajahn Brahm, you might have heard it before, told a little differently. It's called the anger-eating demon. And so, the way the story goes is this. There's Saka. Saka is the king of the Devas. Now this is This is not on earth. This is in the heavenly realms above, this story. And so Saka is the king of the Devas. He's gone. He's out. He's doing whatever he's doing. And into the throne room comes this big, ugly Yaka. Personally, I feel Yakas get a bad rap, but mostly people describe them like big ogres, big orcs, these kind of beings. Big, ugly, mean beings. And so this big, ugly Yaka comes up to the throne room and just sits right in Saka's throne room, right in his throne. And of course, all the attendants and all the devas around got angry. It's like, who are you? Who are you, ugly thing? How could you sit in Saka's throne room and on his throne? There's a funny thing that happened. The more that they abused him, the more that they yelled at him, the more handsome he got, the more comely he got. And why is that? They were feeding anger what it wanted. So he became this wonderful, handsome looking being sitting on Saka's throne. But they didn't notice this. They didn't know what else to do. But then Saka came back. And he knew what to do. He announced who he was to the Yaka. And he gave that Yaka Metta, kindness. He treated that Yaka with kindness. And then that Yaka lost all of his handsomeness and all of this, everything that fed him to become what he did, all that anger, it all went away. And then he disappeared. That's the anger-eating demon. A demon that feeds off anger. And that's our mind. Right? We want to feed off, when we have anger come to our mind, it wants to feed off of us. But we don't have to feed it. We can starve it. We can practice metta. And so, I wanted to end this section with two real quick Dhammapada. Oh good, I don't have a watch, so I can look at your watch to know what time it is. Two real quick quotes. One, the first time I heard this, there's a part of the Dhammapada called Happiness, the Sukha Vagga. And the quote goes like this: happily we live, friendly amidst the hostile. Amidst hostile people, we live, free from anger, free from hatred. And you think about that and you think, wow, can I do that? Can I really do that? The answer is yes, you can. It's not easy. It's easier said than done. But this is where this practice leads. And of course, one of the most famous sayings, hatred is not appeased by hatred. Only by goodwill is hatred appeased. This is an eternal law. The Buddha didn't play when it came to metta and anger. He taught us how to deal with that. And let's everybody will have a copy of the Karaniya Metta Sutta in English. So if you can pass these around. These are yours to keep. So keep these around for at least the duration of the retreat. And please take them home as well. This is exactly, if you come to Bhavana Society, this paper is what we read from every day before lunch. We all read this English together. And so, just some background on this. This Karaniya Metta Sutta is from some of the oldest parts of the Nikayas. It's about as old as we're going to get and close as we're going to get to the Buddha's words on metta, pending any kind of miraculous archaeological finds. And there's a wonderful story that goes along with this. The story goes that there were these monks. The Buddha exhorted monks and said, okay, now go into the woods and practice. If you've read the suttas, you see that's fairly often. There's the root of trees, there's an abandoned building, go practice. And so they went into this forest. And of course in the story, in the forest, there's all kinds of devas and various different beings. And the devas at least, some of the yakas, but the devas at least, are very respectful of religious renunciates. And so they were very respectful of the monks as they went, and the monks and the nuns as they went, and they sat by their trees. But some devas lived in trees, kind of like elves and stuff like that. So, but then basically the monks overstayed their welcome. The devas got annoyed. Why are these monks bothering us in our trees and all these kind of things? And so one night, all of a sudden it turned into The Walking Dead in the woods, or a horror show. The story goes that the beings showed headless beings and heads flying around the wood. All of these scary sights, so that the monks basically got afraid and they ran away. And they went to the Buddha. And what the Buddha's instruction was this sutta. And so the end of the story goes is that they went back and practiced this metta. And then they were able to abide in peace there with all beings in the forest. So I'll just quickly go through these words. May all beings be happy and secure. May all beings have happy minds. Whatever living beings there may be, without exception, there's your limitless. There is no exception to this. Weak or strong, long or large, medium, short, subtle or gross, visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth. May all beings have happy minds. So this first section, the Buddha is making sure that we understand that there is no distinction, there is no limit to our metta. It's not metta for these kind of people and not for those kind of people. Any being, anywhere, any size, visible or invisible. And of course that includes, little beings that we can't see. But to the Buddha it also includes beings like the devas and the yakas. And whether you believe in their existence or not, in a way, in my own practice, to me that doesn't matter. What it does matter is in the way you limit your goodwill. And we're going to practice metta again after this, and I'll speak more about that. We don't want to limit because, again, we're not literally going out to the reaches of existence and into infinity. We're doing this in our mind. And so we don't want to limit our metta in our mind at all. So, visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth, may all beings have happy minds. Let no one deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere. Neither from anger nor ill will should anyone wish harm to another. So in this tetrad, or this verse, these sets of verses, we're making the wish that people act in ways that are skillful. People act in ways that are beneficial. Not to deceive anybody. not to despise anyone, neither from anger nor ill will. So we're making an aspiration, a wish, in hopes that people are able to, through their own actions, through their own practice, develop the wisdom to abide by this good advice. You can't force somebody to abide in metta. You can't force somebody to stop their anger. They have to do it themselves. But we can practice it in our own mind, and we can have goodwill and a good wish that people can do this practice as well. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so towards all living beings, one should cultivate a boundless heart. Now this set of verses is debated back and forth as to what exactly it means. Actually, I remember a year and a half ago, Bhante J and I debating this a little bit back and forth. And some people say it means that we cherish and protect all beings, just like a mother cherishes and protects their child. The other way that people can see this is that the Buddha is exhorting us to protect our mind state of metta, just like a mother protects her only child. So we have this mind state, and we want to cultivate it. We want to abide in it. We want to keep it. And if it goes away, we want to do what we need to do, set the groundwork for it to come back. And why do we want to do this? It's because we see, when we practice, we see that when we have ill will in our minds, when we have anger, when we have hatred, our actions are almost never beneficial to you or to others. This, a mind state, just like the Buddha said, all actions are led by the mind. Our actions, our physical actions, bodily actions, verbal actions, come from our mind state, are affected by our mind state. So, to protect, you can protect your mind state of metta, and also, if you'd like, you can, in your mind, keep the protection of goodwill towards all beings as well. It's up to you how you'd like to practice that. One should cultivate for all the world a heart of boundless loving kindness, above, below, and all around, unobstructed, without hatred or resentment, whether standing, walking, or sitting. See, we can practice this. It's not just for the cushion. Standing, walking, sitting, lying down, whenever awake, one should develop this mindfulness. Metta is part of mindfulness. Right? Keeping in mind our sincere wish, our desire to practice and to develop these mind states of goodwill. This is called divinely dwelling here. I'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow when we talk about the benefits of metta. But metta is attributed to, a mind of metta is equal to basically being reborn in the highest heavenly realms. And you can equate that back to what I said about that feeling. If you've been able to observe it, when your mind goes from a mind of ill will and hatred, this heavy mind, and then you notice that that's gone, and you have goodwill again. Like being freed from prison. Like heaven. So that is divinely dwelling here. And then not falling into erroneous views, but virtuous and endowed with vision, removing desire for sensual pleasures, one comes never again to birth in the womb. So what are erroneous views? Views that lead us to perform unskillful actions, actions that are not beneficial to yourself and others. Okay, friends, I'd like for you to keep this throughout the duration of the rest of this retreat. Please review that, repeat that. You can do this when you go to bed. This is a practice that I did for many years, and I go back and forth on. It's something to try to remember before you go to bed. Remembering this sutta, reading through this sutta. When you wake up in the morning, reading through the sutta. Because this is metta. This is, when we did metta before, we were using words to develop the feeling and the mind state of metta. These words can be used for that as well. These are in the instructions and the practice all wrapped up into one.
Doing good on
Okay. I can be very long-winded, so I do try to be. Okay. So there's a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya called the Anuruddha Sutta. And it's from this sutta where we get the instructions for one of the methods, one of the ways you can practice metta. And so somebody goes to Venerable Anuruddha and he asked for the definition of the difference between two types of cetto vimutti, two types of release of mind. One is appamana, which is limitless release, and the other is mahagata, which is exalted release of mind. And so what is the definition for limitless release of mind? If you read the suttas, you'll see that this definition is something you're going to see dozens of times throughout thousands of pages. And it goes like this. One abides, pervading 1/4 with the mind imbued with limitless goodwill. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above, below, and all around, to all as to themselves, one abides pervading the all-encompassing world with the mind imbued with limitless goodwill, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hatred or ill will. That is the instructions that you're going to see most often in the suttas. And that is your directions, these quarters. But it's not only going these directions, the last part of that is above, below, and all around. And so the exalted release of mind goes like this. One abides, pervading the root of a tree with exalted release of mind. And one expands that awareness to the root of 3 trees, to a forest, to a village, to the size of 3 villages, to the size of a kingdom, to the size of 3 kingdoms, to the size of the all-encompassing world and beyond. So you're starting from a small area and you're gradually pervading a larger and larger and larger area with this release of mind. And this is the metta method that I'm going to teach you in our next meditation practice. Okay, friends. So, we have one more section, and this is more about practicing metta for ourselves. So, has it been easy last night and this morning practicing metta for yourself? Anybody have lots of trouble doing that? I know. It's not easy at all. Now, I know what it's like to have a lot of ill will towards myself. Not to have a lot of worth in myself, respect for myself. A lot of maybe even hatred too. Okay? And so it's really, really hard. Because, and also judgmental. We can be extremely, extremely judgmental to ourselves. We can be judgmental to others as well. But oftentimes, it's been my experience in talking to others that judging ourselves harshly is a large barrier to this practice when people get into this practice. So it's important for us to always remember ourselves when we're doing this. Okay? In this society, like I was saying, we have this mindset that if you think about yourselves, you're being selfish. You shouldn't think about yourself. Well, this is going against that. And this is not, we're not practicing metta to be self-aggrandizing or to create a big ego for ourselves. We're practicing metta for ourselves to go against our habitual tendency towards negativity and criticism towards ourselves. We're practicing metta towards ourselves because we, like all beings, deserve our goodwill, our compassion, our understanding, our friendship. And when you are able to be your own best friend, you can be out in the woods by yourself for days, weeks, and you're not being with somebody who you hate. You're not being with somebody who you don't want to spend any time with. You're content to be okay with yourself. And that when you do that, that means that you're content to be with others as well. When you don't criticize yourself, or you criticize yourself a lot less, you criticize others a lot less. When you have understanding for yourself more, you understand others more, and you have understanding for them as well. So you're not only doing this practice of practicing metta for yourself just for you, you're also doing it for others as well. Okay. There's a wonderful simile that came to me a couple years ago as I was doing this practice. As a child, I got to fly a fair bit, visiting relatives in Arizona, and there was something about the airline safety briefing that always made me think. Do you guys listen to that airline safety briefing? Or you just kind of look at your phone and ignore the poor stewardess? Well, what clicked with me when I was young was they said, in the event of oxygen bag deployment, secure your own mask first before securing the mask of the person next to you or your child or whatever. I would always think, well, why? That's kind of silly. I didn't understand that. It wasn't really until I was doing this practice that it clicked and I understood. You are no good to everybody else passed out without oxygen. You can't help anybody else if you're passed out. If you can't help yourself, you can't help anybody else. So this is why you put your own mask on first so you can be useful to others and useful to yourself. You practice metta for yourself first so you can be useful to yourself and useful to others. And there's a wonderful simile, a sutta called the acrobat, where there's a master and an apprentice. And what they do is they go up on these stilts and they perform more of these acrobatic maneuvers. And the Buddha is telling this story to the monks. And he says, the master acrobat says, we will, you watch after me and I'll watch after you. And we'll go up on the stilts and perform and we'll be safe and we'll make money and we'll enjoy our success. But the apprentice, she was smart. She says, no. She says, I'll watch after me. You watch after you. And then we'll go up on the stilts and perform and be safe and then enjoy our success after that. And the Buddha says, just like that. This is how it is. When you look after yourself, you look after others. When looking after others, you look after yourself. This is the Buddha directly telling us that we are worthy of our own goodwill. And the interesting thing about this is, and we'll talk about this again a little tomorrow, is that in this simile, the Buddha is talking about how do you do this? You're practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So it's actually in doing mindfulness, practicing mindfulness is also metta as well. Because when you're mindful, you are able to better make the choice to do skillful things, to perform skillful actions that are beneficial to others. So, to finish off this talk and to finish off my last section here on the metta to ourselves, what I found helps with me is, this positive self-talk. Positive, people. It's funny. I was actually just thinking about this today. When people think like. Thinking about saying to themselves, you're doing good, you're doing a very good thing, saying positive things to ourselves. We think, oh God, that's so corny and silly. I remember growing up, there was a skit on a TV show where this guy stood in front of a mirror and he said, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. And so these people think, oh, that's really weird. But then I was just thinking this morning when I was walking. I thought, well, we don't think about that when we're criticizing ourselves. We don't think that's like corny or stupid. For some reason, we accept that as truth. We accept that as, yeah, well, I really am this. Right? So, this is why, when you practice this, to remind yourself of your good deeds, what you do. Remind yourself of the things that you do for others, the good deeds that you do for yourself. Coming here to spend the weekend practicing metta is a very meritorious, a very good deed. And sometimes, there's just some times where my mind is so full of aversion and anger and maybe even some hatred, where all I can do, I can't practice mindfulness, I can't sit down and follow my breath, I can't do anything. The only thing I can do is give metta to myself. That's it. And even that's hard, and during those periods. But that is how I get out of that rut. When I can't do anything else because I'm so mired in this ill will and this judgment and criticism of myself. I give this metta, I give positive self-talk to myself, reminding myself that, hey, Jay, you're doing a good thing. You're practicing the Buddha's Dhamma. You're sharing the Dhamma with others. Hopefully they have some benefit from that Dhamma, from that sharing. So reminding myself of the good. Because you don't have to remind yourself of the bad. Our mind reminds ourselves of that all the time. So we want to remind ourselves of the good. Continuously practicing this kindness, friendship, and goodwill for ourselves. Okay, friends? So out of kindness and goodwill, at least for my knees and legs, I think perhaps we should take maybe a 10-minute break before we come back, and we'll do our continue our meditation at that point.